Hey everyone, it's Elaine. I'm back again with a part two, understanding the trauma of growing up in Iglesia and Cristo, or the INC for abbreviation, a deep dive, healing from high control religions or religious cults. So this is just a continuation of the first video that I made, where we talked about the nervous system and how, growing up in a type of system like this can cause trauma within your body. So I just want to preface by saying that I do have my master's degree in education with a concentration in counseling from San Diego State University. I also have a certification in mental health recovery and trauma-informed care. And I'm in the process of obtaining my clinical counseling degree so that I could become a therapist and then help my community, more healing. That's my main goal here. So I just want to say that I think it's a beautiful concept. If you think about religion, turning and to a divine source or a higher power to help guide you, to help heal you, to help you through trials and tribulations in your life. Because let's face it, as humans, we encounter a lot of trials, grief, pain, loss. And when we use religion and we embed that in part of our daily life or our identity, it can be really healing. But when religion turns slowly into a darker energy where there is abuse, when there is high power control dynamics, like an imbalance of power dynamics, and when the system itself is corrupted, and when the system itself is set up to oppress the people within that church or within that system, then that's when it veers into very, very, very insidious territory and can cause harm, like trauma. And a lot of people suffer silently. And that's why I want to talk about it, because just because you're in a religion doesn't mean that the whole, the church that you're in is good. Okay, so that's what I wanted to highlight. So let me go ahead and pull up the diagram that I created. If you haven't watched part one, feel free to do so. You don't have to, but we're just going to focus on these elements that I inputted into this diagram here, understanding the trauma of growing up in the Iglesia ni Cristo, INC, a deep dive, healing from high control religions or religious cults. I want to also make a disclaimer that this can also be applied to other high control religions or religious cults, other fundamentalist systems, because there are a lot of similarities, right? And what makes something a cult, the main or one of the biggest elements that makes something a cult or a religion a cult is the use of fear and coercive control tactics. And the Iglesia ni Cristo has some hidden fear tactics that are not blatantly obvious. Sometimes it's hard to detect them, especially if you've grown up in it for so long. It's normalized to you. It's just part of the system. But if you don't really analyze it and really take the time to critically think about it, then you could be doing yourself a disservice. So one of the fear tactics that the INC uses is this concept of the lake of fire, that you're going to burn in the lake of fire. That is embedded within the indoctrination process, especially if you've been born into the church as a child. You hear that doctrine repeatedly. So that doctrine becomes a part of it's embedded in your psyche. And when someone decides to leave the church for whatever reason, sometimes that fear dangles in the back of your mind, and you might think you will go to hell. You might think you might burn in the lake of fire. It's a possibility, and it does happen for a lot of people, not even people from the INC. It happens in a lot of other fundamentalist religions too, where they're just in fear of going to hell or burning in the lake of fire for simply choosing a different lifestyle or marrying someone else. Another coercive or controlling fear tactic that the Iglesia ni Cristo likes to use is this rule that you can't date a non-member or marry a non-member, I should say. And then they'll take away titles by punishing low key, like seek like in I like to say low key because it's not like super like blatant obvious, the type of damage that's happening, but it's almost like you're guilt tripping the child for marrying someone else, because if their mom or dad is a deacon or a deaconess, whatever their title is in the church, will be stripped away from them. And the child is, because they don't want to displease their parents, it's like almost as if the parent is being held hostage, and then the child is like witnessing this happening. Of course, they don't want to disappoint their parents, but then at the same time, they're going to feel a lot of pain and guilt, a lot of turmoil within them, because they don't want to disappoint their parents. They don't want to see their title get taken away. So that's why it's very manipulative. It's a manipulative tactic used to control and used to create fear and guilt. Yeah, so that is a coercive control tactic that the INC uses. Spiritual bypassing, it's I wouldn't consider it necessarily a fear-based tactic, but it's more of like a little bit manipulative. So what I mean by that, spiritual bypassing is when a minister or someone in a high-ranking official in the church dismisses your emotions and invalidates you and kind of gaslights you. It's kind of similar to that. So I'll give an example. I'll give like a concrete example. So say, you have a concern that you're going through, right? Like you lost your job, and then you go to the minister or you go to whoever high ranking in the church and you say, I am feeling depressed. I lost my job. I don't know what to do. And this is common for a lot of people to turn to religious clergy people and discuss, personal issues that they're going through. And they say, oh, you're just not praying enough. You're not a good member, because you have to continuously pray to God. This is why this happened to you. This is why you are experiencing this right now. You lost your job because you're not praying enough. Maybe you're not devoting enough time to the church. And then essentially victim blaming that person. Oh, it's your own fault for doing this. Or it's your own fault for experiencing this. And that person is just like, wait, what? Like, what just happened here? I'm being blamed for this because I'm not praying enough, because I'm not attending church enough. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So that's what I mean by spiritual bypassing, kind of just dismissing your emotions, not tending to your emotions, not really sitting there and being there with you, just blaming you. And then, like I said, punishing family members, taking away titles, can't marry outside. Those are all fear and coercive control practices. So if we go down the diagram, non-alignment of Filipino values or personal values can lead to a sense of incongruence. And it could also lead to cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is a state of being where you have a set of beliefs that you were typically raised with, like religious beliefs, fundamentalist religious beliefs, and then you start learning about new information, whether that be from the internet, whether that be from school, whether that be from friends, and it starts to conflict and contradict with the beliefs that you were raised with. And a person can experience, when someone's going through cognitive dissonance, they're experiencing a state of lack of clarity, confusion, mental distress, because it's like, oh, this is not lining up with like what I was taught. Like, it's really distressing to that person, and it can cause them to like just completely avoid it or become aggravated and completely shut down and become aggressive and not want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. Okay, that's not true. It's almost like a sense of denial. So cognitive dissonance, a lot of the times happens because there is a non-alignment of like your personal values and the values of the religious church that you were born into. When those don't align, it creates a lot of havoc. It can create a lot of confusion within the person. So some values that may misalign with the values of a high control religion. Particularly in my case, the Iglesia ni Cristo is this confliction between the values of the church and the values of Filipino psychology. So kapwa is a sense of it's like it means fellow human, kindred spirit, neighbor. So this sense of kapwa, when I think of kapwa, I think of being kind to your neighbor, even if you don't share the same beliefs, right? It kind of conflicts with the doctrines of the Iglesia ni Cristo, because it's like, oh, you're not a member anymore. We're just going to expel you. We're just going to dismiss you, and we're not going to talk to you anymore. Sometimes that happens. So another value, a Filipino psychological value, is the sense of pakikiramdam, which is like the shared inner perception that happens between people. Like it's similar to empathy. So you're understanding their pain, you're understanding their story, you're tending to their needs, their emotional needs. And that doesn't really happen a lot within the Iglesia ni Cristo, as in, I'll take, for example, you get expelled, right? For marrying a non-member. And sometimes your family will disown you or not talk to you anymore for leaving. Is that really pakikiramdam? Like, are you valuing, do you have that value? And if you do have that value, it can conflict and create a lot of turmoil if you are still in the INC, or if you're in any other fundamentalist religion. Like, there's no empathy there to understand their plights and to understand their story. So when this sense of incongruence, cognitive dissonance, and misalignment of values happens, and that mental distress becomes so elevated and strong, that's when we start to see mental health conditions arise because of the cognitive dissonance and because of the non-alignment of values. It could create anxiety, major depressive disorder, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, especially when you're leaving. Obsessive compulsive disorder has also been correlated with growing up in a high control religion and has been correlated with religious trauma. So those are some of the common mental health disorders that can happen when you grow up in a fundamentalist high control religion. I do want to highlight some mediating factors, because I don't want to create this blanket overgeneralization statement that this is going to happen to every INC member, because we know that that's not true. We do also want to acknowledge the fact that this has happened and it is continuously happening. So to say that this isn't happening at all is also false. To say that no one is experiencing this mental health conditions as a result of growing up in a religious, high control religion, fundamentalist system, it's happening. And to dismiss it and to not acknowledge it is creating more harm. You're perpetuating the harm by not acknowledging it. So mediating factors, let's get into that. Sometimes this won't happen because you have a more accepting family. Say you grow up in the INC and you have a little bit more of liberal parents that aren't really conservative. And you say, Mom and Dad, I'm going to college and I want to become a Buddhist. And they say, okay, son, daughter, go ahead and study Buddhism. And then you might experience some cognitive dissonance, but the mediating factor is if you have a more attuned family, a less authoritarian family, if your parents are more securely attached, as in they are able to tend to your emotional needs despite the strict authoritarian doctrines of the church, that can offset some of these mental health conditions from occurring. If your parents aren't super active in the church, that can also offset this. If you get, excel in your education, well, not necessarily, you don't have to excel, but if you are exposed to ideas, philosophy, and mental health practices, science, it can offset, some of these from occurring as you kind of grow into your critical thinking skills. Personality too, It depends on the person's personality and their temperament and their genetics that can also offset this from happening. So with that being said, I will say again, and I will reiterate, it's not going to happen to everyone, but it does not excuse the fact that it does happen to a large chunk of people that grow up in the INC and have trauma as a result of growing up in this type of authoritarian fundamentalist system that has narcissistic threads, that has oppressive practices being practiced, and that has, you know, this like patriarchal domination that is happening. So I hope that provided a little bit more clarity of how you can endure, how you can experience, I should say, trauma as a result of being a part of the INC or the Iglesia ni Cristo. I want to end this video on this note here. Trauma is a loss of self. It's a lack of wholeness or fragmentation. To begin to heal means to become whole again. And it's a process. So be kind to yourself as you're transitioning out, or if you're having doubts. You are human. That's what you're. So I just want to say this. If you're having doubts and you're questioning, and someone dismisses you because you're questioning, you've been questioning ever since you were a little girl or a little boy or whatever you identify as, you know, your pronouns. What I mean by that is, as humans, we are inquisitive by nature. When you are 2 or 3 years old, you're already starting to become inquisitive and curious. You're asking your parents, "Mommy, Daddy, what's that? What's this, that?" You know, you're already asking questions. So it's okay to ask questions. That's how you grow. That's how you develop critical thinking skills. And that's how you know, flourish as a human. So trauma is I love this quote. It's by my favorite doctor, Dr. Gabor Mate. He is the leading expert in trauma. And I'll end the video with this. And it says, trauma is what happens inside of you. So inside of your body as a result of what happened to you. And that really sums up how you can experience trauma as a result of growing up in a high control religion like the Iglesia ni Cristo. If you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, you're more than welcome to leave them below. I hope you learned something new today, and I hope this video brought some things to light that you never thought of before. And as always, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.